Welcome to another edition of Sports Junkies. I'm talking a little Bucks basketball. See Sparky Fifer here from 105.7 FM The Fan. Co-host of the Wendy's Big Show weekday afternoons from 2 until 6. Gery Woelfel of the Racine Journal-Times joins us. The Bucks continue to be right about a 500 basketball team like they've been all year. Now Kenyon Martin officially is signed for the rest of the year. You said that when he signed his first 10-day contract that he'd be there for the rest of the year. But you also got some other news on Kenyon Martin that goes beyond this year possibly with the Bucks.
Yeah, there's a possibility that he, after this season, that he'll come on board as one of Jason Kidd's assistant coaches, and I think that's a real possibility. I don't know if it's, well, it can't be official because he's still got to play his contract. But after the season, I think that's going to be heavily discussed, and it'll be interesting to see if they add him as a coach or if they replace him as a coach. You know, if somebody's going to be pushed out, because right now they got great chemistry, not only among the players but among their coaching staff. So you hate to see something like that happen.
Lazio has a bunch of money. They'll just add him. But this is the one thing. Could you imagine if 10 years ago I would have told you Kenyon Martin and Jason Kidd would be living in Milwaukee, Wisconsin?
No.
By choice.
No. I mean,
by choice.
I mean, there are guys around the NBA that are just blown away that Jason Kidd is in Milwaukee, because when he was out in New York, he loved living the high life. I mean, everything was first class with Jason Kidd. And let's face it, Milwaukee is not New York remotely, you know. And there's still people out there that believe that Jason Kidd is not long to be the Bucks coach. That eventually it's going to be he'll move to a different team, or he'll move upstairs and be the official general manager of the team.
Right. And
he'll bring in one of his friends, of course, to coach the team.
Yeah, that could be interesting too. Again, we've talked about how impressed we are with Jason Kidd and his coaching staff. They've done a great job with this basketball team, but they continue to battle little nagging injuries that take guys out. I mean, no Zaza Pachulia, no Ersan Ilyasova against the Orlando Magic, and they wipe the floor with the Magic in Orlando, a place where they struggle to win, and you go and you win 2 or 3 on that little East Coast road trip.
Well, the one key factor for the Bucks this year is they're beating the bad teams. I mean, they're beating the teams that they supposed to beat.
Yes.
Their record against teams with losing records is very good. Now, on the flip side, though, their record against teams with winning record isn't so good, and it'll be interesting to see how they do down the stretch here, and especially if they make any moves at the trading deadline, you know, later this month, and if it kind of disrupts their chemistry and they got to try to find guys in. But at some point, if they want to, you know, they're going to the playoffs. I mean, we all agreed upon that, like back in December, that they're going to go to the playoffs. But if they want to do some damage in the playoffs, they have to develop some chemistry.
Well, there's a couple of things. They need a shooter. They need a low post guy. Same thing we've been saying all year about this basketball team. Would you say the odds are probably better that they sit on their hands and not do anything at the trade deadline?
You never say never. I mean, again, to me, I'm looking at the big picture. This has been like a storybook season for them. Nobody expected them to do what they've done. But at the same time, I'm still looking at the big picture. If I can move Ilyasova, if I can move Pachulia, any of those guys, veteran guys, Dudley, Middleton, you know, another guy, I mean, although Middleton's a younger player, and you can get some good young piece in the next year or two, I don't care, because I know I'm going to the playoffs, and that's all anybody was ever expecting from this team, or hoping.
Nobody thought they were.
Exactly. No. So, I mean, they've already fulfilled everybody's dream for this team.
And you're doing it without a guy that you thought was going to be your best player, Jabari Parker.
Exactly.
And you're still winning, despite the fact that Jabari's not out there with what everybody thought would be 17 or 18 points a night. You're still overcoming that and winning. And Giannis has kind of gone into the tank a little bit. He's been very inconsistent. Hasn't been scoring the ball nearly as well as he was in the past.
That's a crazy thing, Steve. You know, you would have thought once Parker went out, you would have thought, hey, the Greek Freak would have had to step up. And he really has.
His offensive numbers haven't really changed.
No, he's been a very, very mediocre at best offensive player.
But I'll tell you what's happened. When Parker was healthy, Jared Dudley was a non-factor, really.
He's a factor.
Jared Dudley now has become a factor and has become that player that they wanted off the bench. Mayo got hot there for a stretch of time, for 5 or 6 games as well during this whole thing. Brandon Knight's been consistently scoring the basketball pretty good. And Middleton found his stroke again.
Right.
At the beginning of the year, Middleton was lost and couldn't figure out how to score the basketball. So he stepped up. So while Giannis didn't step up, you did have other role players that figured out a way to step up and play well. But Defensively, they swung to the basketball.
Yeah.
They play pretty good defense, and they're shooting the ball a whole heck of a lot better than they have in years past.
Well, the defense is, to me, by far the single most reason why they're playing well. I mean, their defense is as good as any defense in the league because they do a lot of trapping, and that's what we were talking about before. The bad teams can't handle traps.
Yep.
Like last night, they played Orlando, and Peyton's a rookie. He's not used to seeing these kind of traps thrown at him. So they become discombobulated. But the good teams, the teams that they can't beat on a consistent basis, they're veteran teams. They see the double team coming. They shoot it out. They spread the floor.
Those good teams that they're not beating, they're right there with.
They are.
It's not like they're pulling away and beating them by 15.
But that's fool's goals, too, because the really good teams, for the most part, don't get up for these teams. When the Bucks come into town, they're not saying, gee, we got to get up for LeBron James. Sure. We can't. We're not getting up for Monte Ellis and the Mavericks. We're not getting up for the Golden State. There's probably about 10 teams that they do get up for. The Bucks aren't one of them.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, I agree with you on that. Yeah, I don't disagree with you on that at all. The other thing about this Bucks basketball team right now is John Hammond as general manager. Kind of been off the radar for most of this season. Haven't really seen a lot from John Hammond. How is he doing, and what is his role now? I mean, is it still general manager?
I wish I could answer that. I haven't seen John Hammond. He's been on the road scouting constantly, but I think it's pretty well known that he's pretty much become a puppet in the organization. I mean, Jason Kidd is the guy. He's running the show. There isn't any question about that. We saw it evidenced by the fact that they signed Kenyon Martin, who he played with, in the NBA. And then he also just picked up Gutierrez, who he had on his team last year. Those are not John Hammond moves. It's very apparent. But everybody around the league is already speculating that John Hammond will leave the Bucks after the season.
Leave by his own admission or by proxy?
He could probably stay on in a scouting capacity, in that manner. But, as far as having any clout or any say, it's not going to happen.
And whoever the GM is after that has to understand that it's Jason Kidd's show.
Oh, absolutely. Everybody realizes that. It's a question of time to some NBA people as to when Jason Kidd becomes, quote, the official president of basketball operations like Stan Van Gundy in Detroit.
I'll tell you one thing. And I don't know what kind of speaker he is, whatever, but if Kidd were to go to the GM role and they give the head coaching job to Prunty, I'd be okay with that.
That's a possibility. I mean, you've heard him talk.
I like him a lot.
He's talked to Prunty quite a bit, and Prunty is, to me, an outstanding coach.
Yep.
Now, an X's and O's coach. Now, whether he can communicate,
that I don't know.
We don't know that. I mean, nobody does. I mean, I remember when Tom Thibodeau became the Bulls coach. I can't tell you how many people, Steve, bashed him to me, saying the Bulls just made a major mistake. The guy has no personality. All he thinks is basketball. He can't relate to people. He's turned out to be a pretty darn good coach.
He's going to be out of a job, it sounds like, at the end of the year. But, he's turned out to be a really good coach.
He's one of the top 5 coaches.
He might be a little bit like a Collar Skiles, where he eventually burns on guys and wears out his welcome if you have the same nucleus core guys. Because he rubs these guys into the ground minutes-wise.
Yeah, and he's had assistant coaches that are afraid to leave the office before he does. Because he works so darn hard. Yeah. That's the standard he's set for his assistant coaches. I think Thibodeau's a tremendous coach, though.
It'll be interesting to see what happens there. But the Bucks continue to be 500. They haven't been worse than 3 games under 500, and they haven't been better than 3 games over 500 all year. That's a crazy stat if you think about it. And coming up on the deadline here in February, we'll see what the Bucks do. He's Gery Woelfel. I'm Steve Sparky Fifer. Thanks for tuning in to another edition of Sports Junkies, talking Bucks basketball here at RacineSportsZone.com.